We're in an age of quick clips and ever-flowing content. So how do you create and tell lasting stories on the internet? Let's get into the lore behind Niggas in Nature. What's up with it, y'all? My name is Trevor Went. I am an experiential artist based in Chocolate City, Washington, D.C., and I'm here to talk to y'all about my latest series, Niggas in Nature, and break down the creativity behind it, the creative breakdown of all that is that series. There are plenty of spaces on YouTube to talk about the technical skills, to talk about the specs of cameras and lenses and how to light and all these sorts of things, right? But where do we go for creative inspiration? So I'm trying to fill that gap with this, right? I want to talk about the breakdowns behind the projects that I make to kind of enable folks to tell better stories, to create art and create bodies of work. Because if you have not paid attention to my ish yet, bodies of work mean a lot to me. So let's chop it up, y'all. Let's get into the lore of Niggas in Nature. So I want to talk about the deeper messages behind Niggas in Nature. So Niggas in Nature is a pretty straightforward series in terms of narrative conversation, right? But there's like nuances in how I'm getting through those conversations and how those conversations are set up and what sort of creativity went behind that and what's happening while those conversations are going on. My big goals for us niggas is when I'm talking about Black people in these spaces to hold attention, like I've talked about in so many different episodes, to hold attention of both challenging our community and our common position on what you hear about nature and our spaces and whatnot, while also holding in tension the experiences that we already have outdoors and the ways that we show up in outdoors, cookouts, family reunions, block parties, this, that, and the third that might come in like that, but then also our experiences historically outdoors and our oppressions and why the older generations might have legitimate fears and concerns and hesitations about hitting up a national park or something like that, especially when you're just talking about how few of us are out there, right? And then if you go back and listen through the series, Niggas in Nature, you can link out to that or it'll be at the end of the video. The soundscapes are intentionally connected to the conversation points that are happening within the episodes. My hope was that y'all would feel like you're right there on the block, that you would feel like you're right there on the porch. You feel like you're right there on the corner. You feel like you're right there in the city posted up talking with the homie in a space that might feel mad familiar or similar to something that you might experience on a day-to-day, on a week-by-week basis or experience coming up. And then my hope is in making these places feel familiar, in the places that we're known, the places that we're surrounded by people who care for us, that we could also be challenged in our perspectives and our thoughts and push our minds and help us to rise together as a people, as a community, as a whole when we're walking through this sort of conversation. So photographically, for me, the deepest importance of what you could see in the visuals, we talked a lot about the video format, but we haven't really talked about the photos. And so for me, it's like the deep importance was that we would be able to see ourselves in these spaces, that you would see another nigga in the space, like see a nigga that looks like you, dress like you, talk like you in a spot that might be completely foreign to you, that you could then see yourself experiencing something like that because you saw somebody doing it. I know that like people talk about identity politics and this, that, and the third and kind of downplay representation, but representation is a big piece of the stories that we tell ourselves. And we are so much made up of the stories that we tell ourselves. And so if we don't have representation in spaces and create stories that are widely seen, that will help us to tell better narratives about ourselves, we will end up in the same places or worse off than we have been in past generations. Because at the end of the day, our experience is resistance, our joy is resistance. And so we have to keep pushing the boundaries of what is and has been possible for us as a people. So when we talk about society and the narratives that society tells us, society has often told us that the stories that we have of these places, that they're for white people and white people only. Let's think about how much that just makes sense. When you talk about white only placards in front of bathrooms and restaurants and theaters, like all these different spaces that we've experienced through Jim and Jane Crow, through segregation, and all the laws that came with those things to keep us from experiencing the fullness of whatever we could experience in our areas, that we were always giving the lesser of the two. It was never separate but equal. It was separate but unequal. And so when we look at these national parks, those were spaces that we also experience this sort of lack of ability to engage because they were what they look like, because those experiences could be so transformative. They could be so awe-inspiring. They could be so grandiose and vast, this, that, and the third, whoop. And so that's why when you look at these stats of why they're so white, why the people who visit these spaces every year, there's so much of a lack of Black folks, indigenous folks, which that's a whole nother layer of why the indigenous folks are kept off their own lands, the spaces that they actually inhabited. And then peoples of color in general after that, Latino folks, different other peoples of color who fit into those categories of who aren't showing up in these stats of people who are visiting national parks every year. So most of the folks that I've seen in these parks in my personal experience is like white folks from here, European white folks who are coming in on vacation, and then you see Asian folks who are coming in from vacation from somewhere else. And sometimes you'll also see like Asian folks from out here, but more often than not, I've seen folks who are clearly on vacation coming to these spots in the spaces that I've been. Yellowstone, Yosemite, Zion National Park, but you'll also see in the more local spaces and stuff like that, plenty of Asian folks who are from around here as well. So there's a different relationship that's happening in those sorts of spaces. And then in the end of the day, though, they're still not making up anywhere near the population of the amount of white people who are experiencing these spaces in comparison to other folks. And the National Park Services are recognizing that that's an issue because for them, it's threatening the dollars. So they're trying to change those things as well. And so for me, it's like, how do we reclaim our rights to experience these spaces? And these are the stories that I'm trying to tell. This is the lore behind this thing. And that's not to say that we own these spaces or anything. Like nobody owns the outdoors. No one owns the earth. The indigenous people of these lands have claim to abide in these spaces because these are the spaces that their communities, their histories, all of those histories of their families and their ancestors go back into. The peoples who are wiped out and are no more represented, the claim that they had to abide in those spaces. But it is to say that for Black folks who were forced to build this country, forced to build some of these national parks, forced to amass this country's wealth, to make cotton king, to expand this country to a world power because of all of the hundreds of years of forced, unpaid labor, we deserve to see it all. We deserve to see every corner of this country. We deserve to see the best that this country has to offer at a bare minimum. This is the smallest form of reparations that we could have. We deserve to see every bit of it. And so at the heart of niggas in nature is that's what I want people to understand. Like that's what I want my niggas to understand. We deserve to see all of this stuff. We deserve to experience the fullest life that we possibly can experience. And so how we move in life is a product of, like I said before, the stories that we've been told, the stories that we tell ourselves, and ultimately the stories that we believe. And so we must tell fuller, more inclusive, more expansive stories to expand our vantage point, to expand our perspectives, to give us now and into the futures of those who come after us a fuller, more substantive life. And that's it, y'all. That's the lore behind niggas in nature. I'll catch y'all on episode 6. Be easy. Be safe. Peace.